So the trick to apply a filter in such a way that the parameters of the filter are changing over time is to not go from the filter menu. In general, you do instead go from the timeline. So if you have the timeline, if you have an animation, you should see this animation timeline. You can hide it or bring it back here with the animation controls or not. Where was it? Hold on a second. There is a place for this and I forget where it was. Animation controls. Oh, no, that brings it back. Okay, you can close it here. And it's not a toggle. You can go to animation and bring the controls back. All right, so we have a timeline here. And with the timeline editor, you get to see all of the frames and a little preview here, and then apply a filter. So this menu here gives you a lot of filters very similar or identical to what you see here from this filter menu. Right. Not exactly the same, not all of them are there. There's in fact a few that are here that you don't see here. But by and large, many of the filters here in the timeline can be animated not only in the sense of applying the same filter parameter set over the image sequence that you have in your animation, but in the sense that you can even see some parameters that you may want to change over time. Right. Now, not always are there parameters that can be changed. It depends on the filter. But let's see, for instance, the mosaic filter. There is a parameter that's the step size. And so as you change that, you can see that the effect will be different. If you have very small step size, it will be highly granular, very small blocks. And if you have a higher value, you will see it this way. Well, you can change that over time. So here right now I have a very coarse high level, and then here I have a fine level. And what I can do is change that over time simply by setting a keyframe. So I go, for instance, to the very beginning, the first frame, and I set it to a minimum value and add a keyframe, create a key. Okay, and then I go here to the end, and I want it to be maximum value and create a keyframe for that. And now it's going to go change the value, and you might change the location on the timeline. You can grab these and say where you want that to actually have reached that particular value. Right here, you might want to start initially for a few frames without changing the value, and then it starts to ease in and start changing the value. You might do a whiplash too. You might say, for instance, around here, it will already be at the max. Let's go set it to the max and mark a keyframe, and then shortly after that, set it to the minimum. Right, and then go back somewhere around here with sort of a medium range value already along that. So now you see that it's changing the parameter from nothing to full to nothing to full, and you can make these even tighter, bring them very close together. So there's a little bit of a whiplash on that action. And the thing that's going to happen when you render this right here, apply it, what's going to happen is that it's going to interpolate through these values. This is only one scalar value, one parameter that's changing, but there are some filters with more. We'll take a look at a few. And the interpolation can be either a linear or a spline interpolation. So by default, it's a nice smooth spline. Sometimes you prefer a straight linear interpolation and apply that. I would always recommend you save undo. It's going on your hard drive. It slows it down a little bit, but it's not very significant. And it certainly helps if you need to undo. If you click this undo, but you had not marked this save undo checkbox, then it has nothing to undo. It will not go back. Whereas here, you can actually undo this and restore what you did to go back one level to the prior image sequence. All right, so let's apply this like this, and then let's go to another filter. Let's see, for instance, 3D perspective. Oh, there are 4 parameters there. You could change it so that it goes from this to that. So let's go here, set the keyframe. We are at the start. Let's go to the end. Let's rotate to this side. Sometimes you can go do that right in the image here. This one doesn't have it, but some parameters, some filters will have an interactive behavior inside the view, inside this preview. Here you could also change the pitch, perhaps a little bit less on this part, the heading, the pitch. The texture can also change. You can have it scroll in texture space. Let's do that. So let's go back to the first one here, and perhaps what we'll do initially, let's go say everything starts moving from here, but before that we just want the UV addresses to change. Right, so we have several parameters that can change independently. We might say this is going to go up, so it's going to go from here, and then it's going to go, and then finally we also start rotating. All right, let's go apply that puppy. And let's see what else we could do. We could, of course, do all sorts of color changes. We could do all sorts of filters that transform this. Let's see what sort of transforms we have. Wave distortion. Different sources for waves. You can have a number of wave sources. You can have the frequency changed. And that again can happen and change over time. So you can have one without displacement at first, at the very beginning, somewhere here. Keyframe that, and then by around here, or maybe here, you have a lot of displacement. And then back here, you go back to no displacement, right? So there's a lot of things you can do with these keyframes. Apply that. And it doesn't stop there. There's a lot of things here that you can turn this into 3D. There's a 3D perspective we've seen, but there's also the 3D designer. With the 3D designer, as you've probably experimented with it already, you're creating the starting point of landscapes, 3D mountain ranges. You can add some erosion, or you could say maybe you want to just change the elevation of this. There's a whole lot of different things you can do with that. I'm going to give it a bit of a different lighting. Let's say altitude low, zenith high, a little bit brighter since it's farther away, and enable the ray trace soft shadows. Perhaps a little bit of brightness on the second light source. That would be perhaps just from above, and a bit of a bluish tint. Let's give it even more bluish. And the light source number 1 will be a bit more on the reddish side. There you go. Let's give it also a bit more of an altitude, so we see some of the light get into the valleys. And now we want to rotate this, and so change the heading. But that rotation is something that we want to change over time, right? So we are done with the initial parameter selections. Well, not never done really. We might want to add some anti-aliasing for better quality. Let's give it not too much. Just for the demo here, I'll give it 1 or 2 levels. There, something like this. And with some extra pre-filter. So when you're done, when you click OK, it takes you back to this preview here. And it now uses this image as an elevation map for the 3D transform, and you can go in this preview. As I mentioned, some of the filters will allow you to do some changes right here. So with the right button, you can change this parameter down here. That's the Z position, and so you can fly into the scene, or you could just keep it tame and fly around it. So you see some of the parameters here. And I'd say, for instance, we'll go to the very beginning. You see everything is changing dynamically. It's taking this animated image sequence as an elevation map to produce an animated 3D terrain. And so this can be very wacky. I'm going to go and keyframe this. And then here I want to be a little bit closer. So I'm going to go like so. And also bring it in closer like this. Okay. There you go. Keyframe that. So we have some parameters to go through here, and the whole thing will animate. Now maybe I want to make it even wackier and add some mirroring. This one here is not a blocking filter. I can actually go in and do some other stuff here. And for instance, if I'm back at the painting level, the draw tool, there is a mirror option here. Symmetry, I'm going to go with horizontal and vertical. And that's going to add some extra pizzazz. That's going to add some extra weirdness. So for sure, yeah, now you see the whole thing is symmetrical, right, in the preview here. Let's go and apply it right on the fly. Not what we expected, isn't it? But hey, you know, that's the surprising side of it, and sometimes you discover new types of arts. Because of the mirroring now, it's doing a little bit different from what the initial view had. The preview here did not actually show the full effect of the filter, of the mirror action, the symmetry. So that's something that you can imagine and then verify if it's doing what you wanted it to do. What you want to do is to have some amount of imagery in the upper half, and then that will get mirrored down to the bottom half. Same thing, I think, right to left. So the upper right quadrant is what it's actually using when the symmetry is enabled. Right. All right, so we are done with this. If you didn't like it, you could certainly clear all and undo. Right. And guess what? We are back to where we came from. So this time we'll do this without the mirror.